The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 204.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Ben Parr, author of Captivology, The Science of Capturing People's Attention. Ben, he kind of talks about this is more of the science behind it, but he really covers this information from a different angle that I haven't heard yet. So I think you guys are going to love this episode and love this book. He does a great job of breaking it down for us. So without further ado, let's bring on Ben. Welcome, Ben, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we take a deep dive into Captivology, will you take a moment to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you personally.
Hello, my name is Ben Parr, and I am the author of Captivology, the Science of Capturing People's Attention. I'm also the founder of Dominate Fund, an early-stage venture fund that coaches startups on attention and how to capture attention for their products. My original claim to fame in the tech industry, though, is I was the co-editor and editor-at-large of Mashable and helped run West Coast for 3.5 years. And I've done a whole bunch of other crazy things in the tech industry and gotten some fancy awards, but mostly it's just helping entrepreneurs and hopefully with this book, helping a lot of entrepreneurs.
Excellent. So first off, thank you for sharing that. And now let's jump right into that book. Captivology, the Science of Capturing People's Attention, which I actually wanted to confirm with you too. Was that just made available like March 3rd?
Yes, it was made. Yep. Beginning of March.
Awesome. Of 2015. And Ben, we're going to move quickly here today, but the whole goal is to answer a couple of the questions that'll help our listener / future reader get a great sense of if this is their next great read or not. And so the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing Captivology?
So I was inspired actually initially by entrepreneurs. And so when I first left Nashville and I started doing the venture fund, the kind of help that startups came to me for was all around attention, was press. How do we get the attention of journalists? Marketing. How do we build a go-to-market strategy? Customer and user acquisition. Virality. How do we build virality into our product? How do we get more influencers on a platform? They're all around attention. And so, there's lots of entrepreneurs who can build great products, but building a great product is only, a tenth of the battle. You have to be able to get that great product out there and get wide adoption. And that's kind of what really started me down the book. But when I started really looking into the research, and it was I've had book offers over the years, but this was the first time I really found a subject that was underserved and fascinating. And as I did the research, I really came to realize that attention is the fundamental lifeblood of the modern economy. And it's not just entrepreneurs, but teachers need the attention of students, and musicians need the attention of fans and agents, and parents need the attention of their kids. And so that kind of set me off the path of writing this book.
Excellent. What would you say? This is such an important question because so many books are coming out on a daily basis. So what makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
What I set out to do was not write a marketing book or write a social media book. There's tons of those. This is at its core a science book. There's a lot of scientific research and information in this book. And I don't base my suggestions or the triggers based on my gut feeling. I went through the actual science. I went through 1,000 research studies. I interviewed dozens of PhDs to truly understand the subject at a fundamental level and how it could be applied in daily life. And it really was just fascinating. But I wrote it in a way where it would have that scientific knowledge, but be readily accessible by anybody. It wasn't written for as much a specific audience, but written so that it could apply to almost any audience. And I think people who read it will find that it's filled with scientific information, but it's not a textbook, and that a lot of it is actually the storytelling that applies that science. And so I find it's a kind of a unique mix that most other books really haven't nailed.
Ben, how do you suggest the reader engage with this book? Is this one that they can jump in and jump out, kind of cherry picking information as needed? Or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
I think that you can cherry pick information, but you're going to get the most benefit by reading it front to back. It's a sense that you have to read chapter 1 because that really explains what the stages of attention and how attention really works. And then you can read different triggers and how those triggers work. But I don't think you have a complete toolbox without reading the whole book and having all 7 triggers. After that, after you read through it though, then you'll be able to just like jump in and be like, what was that one trigger? What was that one technique that Ben talked about? And be able to pull that information and that nugget out of it.
Now that we know a little bit of the purpose behind the book, a little bit of the background, let's this is my favorite part where I'm going to hand over the mic and allow you to take a deep dive into the content itself. So we take the next 5 to 8 minutes and really let the listener, the future reader, get a great idea of what your book's all about.
The book is divided into 2 key sections, and I'll describe some of the key pieces and findings. And of course, I can only go into so much in 8 minutes, but the first part is what I call the 3 stages of attention. And I go through the new kind of model that I found for how attention works and how we should think of attention. Because everybody seems to think of attention as this kind of short-term, reactionary thing, or short-term focus, or even, attention spans. But that's not really attention in the fundamentals. Attention is really a memory construct, and it really goes in 3 stages. Immediate attention, which is our immediate reaction to certain stimuli. It's the reaction we have automatically to a gunshot, or if a car were coming at us, because if we didn't respond to that automatically, we'd be dead. Then there's short attention, which is when we become conscious, and it's our short-term focus on something and our short-term fascination with something. And then there's long attention, and that's our long-term interest, and that's our long-term fascination. And that's the difference between listening to a Beyonce song on the radio and becoming a lifelong fan of Beyonce's work and going to all her concerts. And these 3 stages of attention, I think too many people don't think about how to walk their audience through all 3. They think about how do I get initial attention, but not what to do with that attention afterwards, which is why I talk about a lot walking your audience through those 3 stages of attention. And, my example in the book, chapter 1, is Super Mario and Shigeru Miyamoto, and how I interviewed the creator of Super Mario, and how they focus on, they created Mario to be a distinctive character that could be easily seen on old pixel screens, immediate attention, and how they've designed gameplay where you would be able to do it in small sittings, but want to come back for the next one. And that's short attention, and being able to capture your attention for a level, or, for stage, rather than like for 12 hours. And then long attention, which is not just playing a game, but coming back for the next one. And that's actually because of the characters and your and the relationship people have built with Super Mario, and how Super Mario is kind of, because he doesn't talk, is kind of an everyman. You can see yourself in him. But the key and the structure really of the book is around those 7 captivation triggers. And these are the 7 psychological triggers that kept on coming up through my research that capture attention across all 3 stages. And they are automaticity, framing, disruption, reward, reputation, mystery, and acknowledgement. And I'll give a quick rundown of each. And so, and they go across all 3 stages from beginning to end. And so, automaticity is understanding the automatic reactions we have to certain sights, sounds, and colors. It's understanding, for example, that yellow and orange are great for website buttons because they have high contrast. That's why Amazon has them as buy buttons, because they have high contrast with white and gray backgrounds. But they're terrible if you want, for example, to have people think you're competent, because they have the lowest correlation with competence. That's why you don't see people coming into interviews with orange suits. And so understanding these kind of associations. In fact, if somebody looks at just the Disney logo and somebody just looks at the IBM logo before taking a creative task, they will be more creative if they just see the Disney logo. These kind of automatic reactions really matter, and matter when it comes to attention. And the second trigger, framing, is about our frame of reference, and how our frame of reference, and based on our world experience and our culture and our biology, really does change the way in which we pay attention. And your job is to understand your audience's frame of reference. Whether they're sleepy, or whether they're sick, whether they're when they're going to be more receptive to your message. In fact, people are most receptive to a message in the beginning of a day, because the more choices they have to make throughout the day, the more fatigue they feel. And so judges actually make more negative decisions at the end of the day, which fascinated me, because if I ever have to go to jail, I want to get sentenced at the beginning of the day instead of the end. Now, the framing has a lot of effects, and we see in politics things like like gun control or abortion and these other contentious issues, where one side will completely tune you out if you start talking, and the other will completely listen to you. Third trigger, very powerful one, disruption, is that we pay attention to the people and things that violate our expectations. And this really comes down from violations expectancy theory, which essentially just shows that and when we were hunter-gatherers, we would pay attention to things that were out of place because it would either be a threat or potential food. We don't have those threats anymore, but we still have the same mechanics for attention. And so when there's a crazy commercial like the Old Spice campaign or the Patagonia ads where they told where a clothing company told people don't buy this jacket, people pay attention. But when it's positive, people continue to pay attention. And so your job is to figure out a way to disrupt your audience's expectations, but in a positive way that's significant with your values and their values. And there's a lot of science to what makes for a good disruption and a bad disruption. And this is where publicity stunts and things come from. Then there's reward. And the reward system of the brain is not one that I think is still not well understood, at least by the general public. And people think of dopamine as this thing that creates pleasure, but really it actually creates wanting. And the science shows that it creates motivation. And your job as somebody who wants to capture attention for your ideas is to create motivation. And you see rewards and games and such all the time, in terms of coins and extra lives and, that sort of thing. But rewards are all across in daily life. We're motivated by food, money, and sex, but we're also motivated by intrinsic rewards like motivation, self-satisfaction, mastery, and purpose. And your job is to balance those two things to capture the attention. Like if you're trying to capture the attention of employees, you want to surprise them with a great extrinsic reward. But if you want to keep them there, you want to use long-term intrinsic rewards and real purpose. And what are they really looking for long-term internally? Reputation, which is that we pay attention to reputable sources, specifically experts, authority figures, and the crowd. And experts by far are it's incredible how much we pay attention to them. One study at Emory University found that if we're listening to an expert, for getting advice from an expert while making economic decisions, the decision-making centers of our brain pretty much shut down because we're paying attention to the expert and we're applying deference to the expert, and we almost always will take what their advice is. And this makes sense in the case of doctors and that where we want to listen to them, but it's also a powerful tool where, one, you need to make sure who you're talking to is an expert, and two, you can leverage that for your own stuff, whether you establishing your own credibility as an expert or bringing in outside experts. In fact, experts are the number one most trusted spokespeople of a brand, more than CEOs, more than people like you, more than other employees at a company. Mystery, is one of the final triggers. And so with mysteries, we pay attention to incomplete storylines and thoughts. And it's because of some interesting science that one thing, the Signark effect, shows that we have stronger memory for incomplete tasks. And uncertainty reduction principle shows that we dislike uncertainty and we take active steps to reduce uncertainty. Mysteries, when you're on a cliffhanger, are filled with uncertainty. And so we come back the next week because we want to have that uncertainty fulfilled. And there are a lot of ways for entrepreneurs to be able to use that trigger and all the other ones I just talked about, and how to create a mystery, whether it's in your product or in your meeting, so that a venture capitalist or someone has to come back for that next meeting. But the most powerful trigger of them all is acknowledgement. And that is, we pay attention to the people and things that provide us with that validation, empathy, and understanding. It's the reason, for example, why Facebook, Twitter, and some of the other social apps are so powerful, because we get instant validation from our friends in the form of likes, comments, and retweets. And that kind of power really brings us back, because we're always looking for validation from our friends. In fact, studies show that the number one reason we want to be famous, and kids want to be famous, the reason why is not because of power, but because we feel like a fame will make us instantly belong and people instantly care about us, which is probably not true, but is what we feel like. But, the great products and the great companies and the great ideas provide acknowledgement for their audience and build great communities. And there's a whole science behind this. And so I talked about these 7 kind of key triggers, and these 7 key triggers capture attention. And I talk a lot in the book about how these triggers get applied by masters of attention, because I interviewed everyone from Sheryl Sandberg to David Copperfield to Shigeru Miyamoto to director Steven Soderbergh, and how that gets applied in different industries, and then how you apply that in both your daily life and for your business, how you capture attention using those triggers.
So Ben, you just did a fantastic job of breaking down the book, and there's so much content and context that you just laid out there. And that's why I feel like this next question can be mean sometimes, because I'm asking you to break it down even further. or really just to bring one of the things that you just talked about to light. And that's if the reader can only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, everything you just discussed with us, what would you personally want that to be?
Here's the thing I learned from all the research I did and from all the people I interviewed. The masters of attention don't try to capture attention for themselves. They try to capture attention for their projects, passions, and ideas. And I want people to think of attention as this positive tool for whatever they do. There's this negative perception around attention, attention, a grabbing attention where you should just build like the quote, "If you build it, they will come," which I think is complete bull. And what you really need to do is go out there and capture attention for your idea if you really think it's worthy, because it is a crowded market and you now have to be proactive about it. And I hope the number one thing is people will identify that attention is a positive thing, especially for getting attention for your ideas and your company and your projects and your employees, and really be proactive about capturing attention, because that's what you must do now. And it's not a bad thing to be proactive about attention. And that's probably the number one thing I want people to take away.
Yeah, it's huge. And this next question is can be somewhat awkward because it's asking you to highlight something that you personally wrote. But do you have a favorite quote from your book, something that you wrote you think will resonate with people? And will you take a second to explain what it means to you?
I would say actually my favorite quotes are ones that came from the interviews I did, And so one of the people, I learned so much from them. And like Sheryl Sandberg talked to me, for example, about motivation and how we pay the people that really capture attention over the long term are the ones that provide motivation for others rather than, trying to gravitate attention towards themselves. I think about, actually, there was one other quote I was thinking about, which was what Steven Soderbergh told me, which was that mystery is a good thing in life. And so, oh God, there were so many good ones. Here. I think there's one quote that I think really encapsulates it all, which is that attention is the most important currency that anybody can give you. It's worth more than money, possession, or things. And I think that's really, really true, because you can have all those things, but if you don't have the attention of whether it's your spouse or your boss or whatever you're looking for, then it's worthless. It means nothing. And I think attention really is this kind of fundamental thing, and I think that quote encapsulates it. There's just so much amazing information in the book, and I got to interview so many amazing people that had quotes far better than just mine.
That's an excellent quote, and we'll put that so people can go back and reflect on that. We'll put that in the show notes at the elpodcast.com, because that's one thing about quotes is it's always fun to go back and actually let them resonate and think about them. So Ben, this next question is, obviously as a book-centric podcast, we have to ask for a book recommendation, but we're not asking for any. We're asking for the book recommendation. So if there was only one book you could suggest to our listener, based on the way that it's impacted your life, it's created a paradigm or a lifestyle shift, what book would you suggest?
I almost want to pick one fiction and one nonfiction because they're so different and they have such different impacts on your life.
Go ahead. Yeah, let's do it.
If I were to pick a non-fiction one, it's a close tie between Thinking Fast and Slow and Quiet, but I'd pick Quiet by Susan Cain. And it's not because and it's an amazing book about the power of introversion versus extroversion. And for me, it was different because I'm an extrovert, but it made me help really understand the power of introversion and why it's not a bad thing to be an introvert, and the science behind that, and how to deal with introverts and how to deal with maybe my own introversion tendencies. And it really gave me kind of this different perspective, even of how to do the book, because I could have easily written a book for extroverts, but that's not what I wanted to do. And when I interviewed Susan Cain and I had a chance to talk to her about it, it really kind of came clear what I did. And when it came to my childhood, it was The Giver. And that book, just like as a kid, there's these kind of books that show you the positive and the negative of the world and the strength of human nature, but also the dark side of it. And it was an introduction into that. And it was just a fascinating story and tale, about the dangers of being the same and the dangers of just trying to fit in and not being yourself. And I feel like I've always been myself, but it really reinforced, I just got to be who I am, and I've got to be what I believe, and I've got to be able to speak out and take action rather than sit back and just let things happen. And I think that's been a fundamental driving force of my life.
That book impacted me as well. I don't remember what grade I read that in, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever, but I remember it still to this day. And matter of fact, they're coming out, or they already did. There's a movie coming out, The Giver. Is there not? Have you heard about that?
The movie already came out, and unfortunately, it's not a bad movie, but it's not a great movie. And you would expect a movie with Meryl Streep and to like just be amazing. But honestly, some of their top actors sort of phoned it in. They could have done a better job, and they did things where they made the main actor just a little bit older because they thought it would resonate with teens, but it didn't really work. Like it was all right, but it was not it didn't live up to the actual book at all.
Gotcha. So it's one of the ones that Hollywood kind of messed up a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time today. And before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also get more information on your new book, Captivology?
So there's on me, benparr.com, benparr.com, or at Ben Parr on every social network ever. Or if you want Captivology, and I hope you do, is captivology.com, Captivology, or just search Captivology on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or any of the other, any local bookstore. It'll be there.
Perfect. Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like an opportunity to win Ben's book, check out the elpodcast.com and become a VIP. And that's also where the show notes will be, the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.